Hello, everybody. This is Chapter 13, U.S. Territorial Expansion in the 1840s. Let's get started. Let's learn some history. Here we go. So this is part one of a series of videos. This one is called Texas Revolt and Statehood. Let's find out what happens here. So the main character in our story here is Stephen Austin. He's a settler that comes to Texas to bring a lot of other American settlers, and they're called empresarios, which roughly translates to entrepreneurs. They're coming here to Texas and they're settling because there's land, it's cheap, it's available, and the Mexican government wants to sort of protect that land from the invading Indians, Comanches, Cherokees that roam these lands. So one of the conditions that the Mexican government put on these people is that they have to learn Spanish, they have to become Catholic, and they have to keep slaves out of that territory. In other words, slavery is not allowed. No slavery. But as you can imagine, when these Americans are not supervised very well by the Mexican government, a lot of them bring slaves with them. And so when the Mexican government eventually finds out, they're pretty angry. So they send this guy, General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, to kind of keep order and impose authority on these white American settlers. And Santa Anna marches his troops to Texas in 1835 and he forces the Texans to abolish slavery, which was illegal in Mexico. Now this, as you can imagine, causes some kind of a revolt in Texas, where a lot of Texans feel like they're being told what to do. And you know, when the government tells people what to do in America, a lot of Americans don't like that. So this all kind of comes to head here, comes to a climax in 1836, where Santa Anna and his troops storm the Alamo here. And as you can imagine, a lot of Americans die. And a lot of other people hear about this battle and they feel like it was unfair. They feel like Santa Anna was kind of a jerk here. And so a lot of Americans start saying, remember the Alamo, so that other people can kind of get excited and support the Americans against the Mexicans in their movement for independence. Eventually, this guy here, General Sam Houston, and his forces, they sort of routed. Routed means they kind of sent back in a rush. They sent back hurrying the troops of Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto. Which we'll explore here in a bit. In 1836, this was a little bit after the Alamo, so this was kind of a redemption for the Americans. At the Battle of San Jacinto, this was a decisive battle where Sam Houston's forces defeated Santa Anna. There's the defeat of Santa Anna, right? Of Santa Anna. And when this guy is defeated, the Americans force him to recognize Texas' independence in 1836. And so Texas becomes basically a free republic in 1836. And as early as 1837, a lot of Texans are asking the United States government, hey, Congress, we want to become a state. We want you to annex Texas as a state. And a lot of Americans are sort of debating this, but no one wants to touch Texas. Van Buren, the president, doesn't want to touch Texas, and it's primarily because of the issue of slavery. See, if Texas is allowed to come in as a slave territory, this would cause a kind of political divide between Americans. And so a lot of Americans don't want to deal with this issue right now. Well, in comes this guy, James Polk, who is a Southern Democrat. And this guy is chosen specifically because he is an expansionist. This guy is what Southerners want. Southerners want a guy that can come in and take Texas and make it into a state. And sure enough, by the time this guy becomes president in March of 1845, Congress decides that they're going to allow Texas to become a state. So Texas is annexed as a state. It's our 28th or 29th state, if I remember correctly. This becomes a pretty important time for Texas, because Texas is no longer a republic. Texas becomes a U.S. state. And this is one of the ways that America sort of expands its territory, right? So America becomes expanded in its territory right after the acquisition of Texas. So this is the end of part one here. We learned that Texans become a state, but before they become a state, we learned there was a revolt and a war. And eventually Texas gained its independence and became a state by 1845. Hope this was helpful.